The senator from Kentucky.
I rise today in support of bringing the Iraq War to a formal end. President Obama has ordered troops home by January 1st. We should rejoice at the conclusion of the war. No matter whether you favor the Iraq War or not, there is a glimmer of hope for democracy to now exist in the Middle East and Iraq. War is a hellish business and never to be desired. As the famous POW and war hero John McCain once said, war is wretched beyond description, and only a fool or a fraud could sentimentalize its cruel reality. This vote today is more than symbolism. This vote today is about the separation of powers. It's about whether Congress should have the power to declare war. Congress vested that power the Constitution vested that power in Congress. And it was very important. Our founding fathers did not want all of the power to gravitate to the executive. They feared very much a king, and so they limited the power of the executive. When Franklin walked out of the Constitutional Convention, a woman asked him, "What have you brought us? Was it going to be a republic, a democracy, a monarchy?" And he said, "A republic, if you can keep it." In order to keep a republic, we have to have checks and balances, but we have to obey the rule of law. Madison wrote that the Constitution supposes what history demonstrates, that the executive is the branch of power most interested in war and most prone to it. The Constitution has, therefore, with studied care, vested the power to declare war in Congress. When we authorize the war in Iraq, we give the president the power to go to war, and we give the power, or the Constitution gives the power to the president to execute the war. All of the infinite decisions that are made in war, most of them are made by the executive branch. But the power to declare war is Congress's. This division was given to make there a division of power, separation of powers, to allow there to be a reluctance to go to war. We have this vote now to try to reclaim the authority. If we don't reclaim the authority to declare war or to authorize war, it means that our kids or our grandkids or our great-grandkids could be sent to war in Iraq with no debate, with no vote of Congress. We've been at war for nearly 10 years in Iraq. We're coming home, and we should rejoice at the war's end. But we need to reclaim that authority. If we leave an open-ended authority out there that says to the president, or any president, it's not this particular president, it could be any president, if we leave that authority out there, we basically abdicate our duty. We abdicate the role of Congress. There were supposed to be checks and balances between Congress and the president. So what I'm asking for is that we reclaim, that Congress, the Senate today, reclaim the authority to declare war. And at the same time, we celebrate that this is an end to something that no one should desire. As Senator McCain has pointed out, as many have pointed out, Dwight Eisenhower pointed out the same thing. If you want to know the hellish of war, talk to someone who's been to war. But that's why this power is too important to be given to one person and to left in the hands of one person, a president of either party. So the vote today will be about reclaiming that authority, reclaiming the authority of Congress to declare war. So I would recommend that we have a vote, and that the vote today be in favor of deauthorizing the war in Iraq. It is not just myself who has pointed out this. The first president of the United States wrote that the Constitution vests the power of declaring war in Congress. Therefore, no offensive expedition of importance can be undertaken until after they shall have deliberated upon the subject and authorized such a measure. This has been recognized from presidents from the beginning of the history of our country. The problem is if we don't give it up, that power is left out there, and it's a power lost to Congress. Frank Chodorow wrote, "All wars come to an end, at least temporarily, but the authority acquired by the state hangs on. Political power never abdicates." This is a time to reclaim that power. It's an important constitutional question, and I hope those senators will consider this seriously and consider a vote to reclaim the authority to declare war. At this point, I'd like to reserve the remainder of my time and temporarily yield the floor.
The senator from Arizona.
Mr. President, I would like to
First of all, thank the senator from Kentucky for quoting me. That's always a very pleasant experience as long as it is something that one would admire. On several occasions, I have been quoted in ways that I wish that I had observed what my old friend Congressman Morris Udall used to say is the politician's prayer, that may the words that I utter today be tender and sweet, because tomorrow I may have to eat them. So I want to thank the senator from Kentucky for his kind words. I also want to praise the senator from Kentucky, who is a person who has come here with a firm conviction that he not only has principles, but he intends to act on those principles as an impactful way as possible and represent the people of Kentucky in a very activist fashion, and he has my admiration. And, however, I would rise in opposition to the amendment.
The senator from Michigan.
Mr. President, I too will oppose the Paul amendment for the repeal of the authorization for the use of military force in Iraq.
The senator from South Carolina.
Thank you. I would like to rise in support of the statements made by Senator McCain and Levin. I don't have that good a feeling about Iraq, quite frankly. I'm not very confident at all that the worst is behind us.
It disappoints me that President Obama opposes a formal end to the Iraq War, but it doesn't surprise me. As a candidate, President Obama was outspoken against the war and for ending the war. He will be bringing the troops home. But this vote and this debate is not about necessarily just bringing the troops home. This is a debate over power. The executive branch wants to keep the unlimited power to commit troops to war. This is about who holds the power. The Founding Fathers intended that Congress should hold the power. This vote is about whether we will continue to abdicate that power and give that power up to the executive. That allows for no checks and balances. We need to have checks and balances. It's what our Founding Fathers intended. With regard to defending ourselves, there is authorization for the President to always defend the nation using force. There is authorization for every embassy around the world to defend the embassy, and that's why we have soldiers there. We also have agreements with the host country that the host military is supposed to support the embassy, and if that fails, we have our own soldiers. We have these agreements around the world. There's nothing to say that we can't use force, but what this says is we're reclaiming the power to declare war, and we will not have another war with hundreds of thousands of troops without a debate. Should not the public debate? Should not Congress debate before we commit troops to war? This war is coming to a close. I suggest we should be proud of it, and I hope people will support this amendment. I'd like to yield my remaining time to the senator from Oregon.
Mr. President.
The senator from Oregon.
Mr. President, I rise in support of Senator Paul's amendment to revoke the war authority. We have heard on this floor that the consequences of revoking authority are vague and uncertain. Indeed, my team has been seeking a reply from the Department of Defense quite some time now as to whether there were any conditions that we should be alerted to where this would create a problem. And here at the last minute, we appear to have a memo that has not come to my office, that says there are possible complications. Well, let's be clear. The executive branch never wants to hand back authority it has been granted. It always wants to retain the maximum flexibility. But as my colleague has pointed out, this is an issue of constitutional authority. We had a constitutional discussion about authorizing action in Iraq, and certainly, contrary to my opinion, this body supported that action. But now the President is bringing this war to an end. And doesn't it make sense then that we end the authority that went with this war and call a formal end to this battle? The issue has been raised, but there might be something that happens in the future. Isn't that true for every country on this planet that something might happen in the future. Something might happen in Somalia. Something might happen in Yemen. Something might happen any nation in the world. And indeed, under the War Powers Act, the President has the ability to respond immediately. Doesn't need to come to this body for 60 days. So there's extensive flexibility that would go with Iraq, just as it goes with every other country, in addition to the authority that has been granted to pursue al-Qaeda and associated forces around the world. When, if not now, should we revoke this authority? Do we say that once granted, at any point, at any time in the future, the administration can go back to war without the authorization of this body? Well, I can tell you that it is time for us to reclaim the authority of Congress, and should the circumstances arise that the President feels the need to go back into a war mode versus many of the other uses of force that are already authorized under other provisions, then he would have 60 days. And he could come back to this body and say, these are the changed circumstances. And under the Constitution, will you grant the power to renew or create a new force of war in that country? And we can hold that debate in a responsible manner. But this open-ended commitment under these circumstances does not make sense. Congress has yielded its authority under the Constitution far too often to the executive branch. So many times this body has failed to do its fair share under our constitutional framework. This amendment that before us today makes sense in the context of the withdrawal of troops and provides plenty of flexibility to undertake any security issues that might arise in the future. And for that reason, I urge my colleagues to support the Paul Amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Who yields time?
To call for the yeas and nays at this point, or do we have an agreement? I ask for the yeas and nays to be recorded.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays have been ordered. The clerk will call the roll.
Are there any senators in the chamber wishing to vote or to change their vote? If not on this vote, the yeas are 30, the nays are 67. Under the previous order requiring 60 votes for the adoption of this amendment, the amendment is not agreed to. The Majority Leader. The Senate will be in order.